The Dosu Galactic Empire's glory stretched across the stars like a shimmering web of power. For 8 centuries their rule had been absolute. Thousands of star systems bowed to their might, hundreds of alien species paid tribute, and their military prowess remained unchallenged throughout known space. Their capital world, Nexus Prime, stood as a testament to their technological superiority, with towering spires of crystalline material that captured and reflected the light of 3 suns. On the command deck of the Imperial flagship, Eternal Dominance, Commander Han stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his decorated uniform gleaming under the blue lights of the bridge. The massive viewport before him displayed the vastness of space at the edge of Dosu territory, where the darkness was broken only by distant stars and the occasional patrol vessel. "Commander, sensors have detected an anomaly in Sector 7, Officer Bay reported, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. "Unknown vessel type, no match in our database." Han's eyebrows raised slightly, the only indication of his surprise. The Empire's database contained information on every known spacecraft in the galaxy. An unknown vessel was unusual enough to warrant his personal attention. "On screen," he ordered, his voice carrying the practiced authority of decades in Imperial service. The main display shifted to show a small vessel drifting near the boundary marker of Imperial space. Its design was unlike anything in Dosu records, seemingly crude with exposed external components, inefficient propulsion systems, and minimal defensive capabilities. It resembled ancient spacecraft designs from primitive civilizations that had long since been absorbed into the Empire. "What is this primitive thing?" Commander Han asked, leaning forward to study the unusual craft. "Magnify." The image zoomed in, revealing more details of the peculiar vessel. Despite its seemingly outdated design, something about its configuration struck Han as odd. The placement of what appeared to be sensor arrays seemed too precisely calibrated for a truly primitive craft. "Life signs?" he inquired. "Affirmative. 4 biological entities inside, Commander. Species unknown." Han's lips curled into a slight smile. A first contact scenario would look excellent in his service record, especially if it led to another species joining the Empire. "Deploy Intercept Squadron. I want that vessel escorted to Docking Bay 3 for examination. 5 sleek Imperial." Fighters launched from the flagship, their engines leaving trails of blue energy as they surrounded the unknown craft. The communications officer opened a channel, broadcasting standard first contact greetings in the 300 most common languages of the galaxy. The strange vessel made no attempt to flee. Instead, it rotated slowly to face the approaching Imperial fighters. For several moments there was no response to the communications. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission, audio only, in a language our systems don't recognize." "Play it," Han commanded. Strange sounds filled the bridge, clicks, whistles, and tonal shifts that seemed to follow a pattern but remained incomprehensible to Dosu ears. "Keep the translation systems working on it," Han ordered. "Maintain intercept." "Course." As the Imperial fighters closed in, the unknown vessel suddenly emitted a burst of energy that washed over the flagship's sensors. "Sir, they're scanning us," the sensor officer shouted, alarm evident in his voice. "The scan it's penetrating our security protocols." Han's expression darkened. "No primitive species should possess technology capable of breaching Imperial security." This changed everything. "Target their propulsion systems," he ordered coldly. "I want that vessel disabled and towed in." The lead fighter fired a warning shot across the bow of the strange craft. In response, the vessel began accelerating away from Imperial space, its seemingly inefficient engines suddenly demonstrating surprising speed. "They're attempting to flee," the tactical officer reported. "Shall we pursue?" Commander Han's face hardened. "No species defies the Dosu Empire. Target their engines and fire." The Imperial flagship's main cannon charged with a building hum that resonated through the deck plates. A brilliant beam of concentrated plasma erupted from the weapon, striking the fleeing vessel squarely. For a moment, the small craft was surrounded by a strange shimmer, almost like a shield attempting to form, before the plasma overwhelmed it. The vessel exploded in a flash of light, leaving only scattered debris drifting in the void. "Target eliminated," the weapons officer announced with satisfaction. Commander Han nodded curtly. Collect debris samples for analysis. Full report within the hour. News of the encounter spread quickly through the Empire's communication network. By the time the flagship returned to Nexus Prime, celebrations had already begun. The official narrative described a potential invasion thwarted, another example of the Empire's vigilance and superiority. Commander Han was celebrated as a hero, receiving a promotion to Admiral for his decisive action in defense of Imperial borders. In the Grand Hall of the Imperial Palace, Emperor Du himself presented Han with a Medal of Valor as thousands of high-ranking officials applauded. Only one person wasn't celebrating. In the data analysis section of Imperial Intelligence, Junior Analyst Kim sat hunched over his workstation, reviewing sensor logs from the encounter. While others saw only triumph, Kim had noticed something peculiar in the final moments before the vessel's destruction. Just before the plasma cannon struck, the unknown craft had transmitted a tight beam signal aimed away from Imperial space. The signal lasted less than a second, but contained a massive data packet that had slipped past the Imperial communications officers during the excitement of battle. Kim spent days attempting to decode the transmission, his eyes growing red from lack of sleep. When he finally isolated a portion of the message, what he found sent a chill down his spine. The data included detailed scans of the Imperial flagship, defensive capabilities, weapon specifications, and what appeared to be a star chart marking the location of Nexus Prime itself. With trembling hands, Kim transferred his findings to a secure data crystal and requested an immediate meeting with his superior, Director Park. The older official received him with obvious impatience, barely looking up from his desk as Kim explained his discoveries. "Sir, the vessel sent a transmission before destruction," Kim reported, placing the data crystal on Director Park's desk. It contained detailed scans of our technology and coordinates for our core worlds. Director Park glanced briefly at the crystal before pushing it back toward Kim. "Meaningless," he replied dismissively. "Desperate actions of a primitive species. In its final moments, return to your duties, analyst. Leave military matters to military personnel." "But sir, if they were able to penetrate our security protocols so easily—" "I said return to your duties," Park snapped, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The Empire has dealt with thousands of species in its history. One destroyed scout vessel presents no threat." Kim hesitated, then collected the data crystal and bowed respectfully. "As you command, Director." As he walked back to his station, the weight of what he'd discovered pressed heavily on Kim's mind. The vessel hadn't behaved like a scout from a primitive civilization. Its scans were too precise, its evasive maneuvers too calculated, and that transmission— why would a dying crew's final act be to send such specific technical data? The strange transmission data still troubled him as he sat back at his terminal. Against protocol, he kept a copy of his findings hidden in his personal files. Something told him that the Empire's victory celebration might be dangerously premature. 3 weeks passed as the celebrations across the Dosu Empire gradually died down. In the high-security research facility orbiting Nexus Prime, a team of the Empire's most brilliant scientists worked tirelessly to analyze the debris collected from the destroyed unknown vessel. The laboratory bustled with activity, robotic arms sorting twisted metal fragments, energy field containment units holding mysterious components, and holographic displays showing rotating 3D models of reconstructed parts. Chief Scientist Lee stood before the examination table, her brow furrowed in concentration, as she studied a small piece of the vessel's hull under a molecular scanner. The reading couldn't be right. She recalibrated the device and tried again, but the results remained unchanged. "Impossible," she whispered, adjusting her glasses. The laboratory's bright lights reflected off her silver hair as she called over 2 colleagues to verify her findings. Across the laboratory, weapons expert Song hunched over a partially reconstructed section that appeared to be part of the vessel's defensive systems. His assistant, a multi-armed maintenance droid, handed him tools as needed, while he carefully traced the pathways of what should have been weapon charging circuits. The door to the laboratory slid open with a soft hiss as Admiral Choi entered, flanked by 2 Imperial guards. The scientists immediately straightened in respect for the decorated military officer, whose combat record spanned over 4 decades of service to the Empire. "I'm here for your preliminary report," Choi announced, his weathered face showing little emotion. The Emperor grows impatient for answers. Chief Scientist Lee cleared her throat and gestured to the main display terminal. "Admiral, I believe you should see this immediately." With a wave of her hand, Lee activated the display, showing microscopic scans of the hull material. "These materials shouldn't exist," she explained to the gathered officers, pointing to the molecular structure displayed in rotating detail above them. "The alloys contain elements we've never encountered before, arranged in latticework patterns that our metallurgists say are theoretically impossible." She tapped a command, and the display changed to show computational circuitry recovered from the wreckage. "Their computer systems use quantum algorithms that are beyond our understanding. Our best AI systems have been attempting to decode their programming language for 3 weeks without success." Admiral Choi's expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Meaning?" "Meaning," Lee continued, "that despite the vessel's seemingly primitive exterior design, its internal technology is advanced, far more advanced than anything in the Empire's arsenal." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. An officer near the back whispered something to his colleague, who quickly hushed him. Song stepped forward, clearing his throat nervously. "Admiral, my team's findings are equally concerning." He activated a secondary display, showing a reconstructed schematic of the vessel's systems. "We've completed our analysis of what we believed were weapon mounts and defensive capabilities." "And?" Choi prompted. Song's face paled slightly. "The vessel's defensive systems were completely dormant during our attack. There are no weapon systems whatsoever, no laser banks, no projectile launchers, nothing that could be used offensively." He pointed to several highlighted sections of the schematic. "These components we initially identified as weapon ports are actually advanced sensor arrays. This ship was never meant for combat." Admiral Choi's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. The blood drained from his face as he stared at the display. 12 conquest campaigns across the galaxy had taught him to recognize the difference between warships and scientific vessels. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "We didn't destroy a warship," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We destroyed an unarmed reconnaissance vessel." The implications hung heavy in the air. In galactic politics, destroying another civilization's military vessel could be justified as defense of sovereign territory, but destroying an unarmed scientific vessel, that was an act of unprovoked aggression that could justify retaliation on a massive scale. "Have you determined the origin?" Choi asked, his mind already racing through the potential diplomatic and military ramifications. Lee shook her head. "The radiation signature doesn't match anything in our database. We believe they come from beyond the Crimson Nebula, a region we've never explored due to the navigational hazards." Choi turned away, staring through the laboratory's viewport at the stars beyond. In all his years of service, he had never felt such foreboding. "Continue your analysis. I need to report to the Emperor immediately." As the Admiral departed, the scientists returned to their work with renewed urgency, the weight of their discoveries hanging over them like a shadow. Meanwhile, in a small, dimly lit cubicle deep within the Imperial Intelligence Complex, Analyst Kim had disobeyed orders. For 3 weeks, he had used his off-duty hours to continue studying the mysterious transmission captured before the vessel's destruction. The work was painstaking and dangerous. If Director Park discovered his unauthorized research, the consequences would be severe. Kim's eyes burned from staring at scrolling data patterns for hours on end. He had created a private decryption algorithm that worked in parallel with the official Imperial systems, but took a different approach. While the official systems searched for known language patterns, Kim's program looked for mathematical constants that might serve as a decryption key. On this night, as the Imperial capital world's 3 moons aligned in a rare celestial event visible through his small window, Kim's terminal chimed softly. The sound jolted him awake from a brief moment of exhausted sleep. Blinking rapidly, he focused on the screen where a partial decryption had finally been achieved. His heart raced as symbols began transforming into readable text. Not the full message, but enough to understand its terrifying significance. The transmission contained a set of precise stellar coordinates and a simple message that made Kim's blood run cold. Targets confirmed. Returning with fleet, Imai. Sat back in his chair, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple despite the room's cool temperature. This wasn't just any reconnaissance vessel they had destroyed. It was a pathfinder, an advanced scout for something much larger. His hands trembled as he copied the decrypted message to a secure data crystal. Protocol demanded he take this directly to Director Park, but their previous interaction had convinced Kim that the bureaucrat would dismiss his findings again. This information needed to reach someone with the authority to act, someone like Admiral Choi. As Kim slipped the data crystal into his pocket and prepared to leave his workstation, the facility's alarm suddenly blared to life. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors as a computerized voice announced, "All personnel report to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Kim froze, wondering if somehow his unauthorized research had been discovered. But as he listened to the continuing announcements, he realized something far worse was happening. The Emperor had called an emergency session of the High Command. All military vessels were being recalled to defensive positions. Somewhere out in the darkness beyond Imperial space, something was coming. And the Empire had just realized they had made a terrible mistake. The Grand Imperial Palace on Nexus Prime buzzed with frantic activity. Guards in polished armor rushed through ornate hallways, while communication officers darted between command centers, carrying data crystals containing urgent military updates. The palace, normally a place of measured decorum and calculated political maneuvers, had transformed overnight into a hive of barely controlled panic. In the central war room, Emperor Do stood before a massive holographic display showing the entire Dosu Empire in miniature, thousands of star systems represented by pulsing lights connected by trade routes and military patrol lines. The Emperor's ornate robes, typically pristine, showed wrinkles from hours of emergency meetings. His face, usually a mask of serene authority, now betrayed the strain of a leader facing an unknown threat. "Unacceptable," Emperor Do hissed, slamming his fist down on the control panel, as reports of delayed fleet movements scrolled across a secondary display. "Every moment we delay gives them more time to advance." Around the circular table stood the 12 members of the High Command, each representing a major sector of the Empire. Their normally impeccable uniforms looked rumpled after 3 days of continuous crisis management. Admiral Gill, commander of the Home Fleet, stepped forward with a tablet displaying the latest deployment numbers. "Your Imperial Majesty, we've already mobilized 80% of our combat-ready vessels," Gill reported. "The remaining 20% are either undergoing critical repairs or stationed at vital defensive positions we cannot afford to abandon." Emperor Do's eyes narrowed. "Abandon? The greatest threat in our history approaches and you speak of positions we cannot abandon?" His voice rose with each word until he was nearly shouting. "Every available ship to the border region. Strip the inner systems if necessary." If their scout had such technology disguised as primitive, what might their actual fleet bring? The Emperor's question hung in the air, unanswered because no one had an answer. The scientific reports on the destroyed vessel's technology had been distributed to every member of High Command, and the implications were clear. They had encountered something beyond their understanding. "What about the 7th Fleet?" asked General Moon, representing the Eastern Spiral Arm. "They're conducting exercises near the Jade Nebula." "Recall them immediately," the Emperor ordered, "and the prototype dreadnoughts at the Kuril shipyards." "Are they spaceworthy?" Admiral Gill exchanged uncomfortable glances with the Minister of Production. "The Thunderstrike-class vessels are only at 70% completion, Your Majesty. Their main weapon systems are installed, but the shield generators haven't been properly tested." "Launch them anyway," Emperor Do commanded. "Have construction crews continue work during transit if necessary." As the Emperor continued issuing orders, the atmosphere in adjoining chambers was deteriorating into something rarely seen in Imperial. Politics, open conflict between factions. In the Council of Ministers chamber, representatives from different political alignments abandoned all pretense of unity. "This disaster falls squarely on the military expansion party," shouted Minister Ryu, pounding the table for emphasis. His face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "Your aggressive policies encourage Commander Han to fire without proper first contact protocols." "Absurd," countered Minister Jin, whose family had deep ties to military leadership. "If the diplomatic corps hadn't reduced funding for xeno-linguistic translation systems, we might have understood their intentions before conflict became necessary." The accusations flew back and forth, while servants scurried around the edges of the room, trying to remain invisible as they delivered refreshments to increasingly hostile officials. In one corner, a group of ministers had started reviewing ancient protocols for evacuating the imperial family to the emergency bunker system beneath Nexus Prime's southern continent, a facility that hadn't been used in 7 generations, away from the political chaos in the newly established Defense Coordination Center. Admiral Choi worked methodically to organize the Empire's response. Holographic star charts surrounded him, showing fleet positions and movement orders as hundreds of vessels converged toward the border region where the unknown scout ship had been destroyed. "Deploy the automated defense platforms in 3 concentric rings," Choi instructed his staff officers, pointing to specific coordinates. "Position heavy missile frigates behind the asteroid belt here. They'll have cover and clear firing lines." His chief of staff, Commander Yoon, leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Sir, realistically, what are our chances if these beings possess technology as advanced as the reports suggest?" Admiral Choi glanced around to ensure no junior officers were within earshot before responding quietly. "We're deploying everything we have, but we're fighting blind. We don't know their numbers, their tactics, or their true capabilities." He sighed, the weight of responsibility evident in his posture. "We may have awakened something terrible." The commander nodded grimly and returned to coordinating fleet movements, leaving Choi staring at the holographic display. He focused on the blinking red marker indicating where the scout ship had been destroyed, the likely approach vector for whatever was coming next. Several levels below in the Imperial archives, Analyst Kim had been granted unprecedented access following his persistent work on the mysterious transmission. His unauthorized research, instead of resulting in punishment, had catapulted him into a special intelligence task force after Admiral Choi personally intervened on his behalf. Kim sat surrounded by ancient data crystals and actual physical scrolls, records so old and sensitive they had never been digitized for security reasons. His eyes burned from lack of sleep as he methodically searched through historical accounts of first contact scenarios throughout Imperial history. A hovering assistant droid brought him another stack of records from deep storage. Archives dating between Imperial years 1200 and 1300 as requested, the machine intoned in its precise voice. "Thank you," Kim mumbled absently, already reaching for the top crystal in the stack. He inserted it into his reader and began scanning the contents, his tired mind struggling to stay focused after nearly 40 hours without sleep. Just as his head began to droop toward his chest, something on the screen caught his attention. His fatigue vanished instantly as he sat upright, reading the passage again to ensure he hadn't imagined it. The record described an encounter during the reign of Emperor Dusevem, approximately 300 years earlier. An Imperial exploration vessel charting the region beyond the Crimson Nebula had encountered an unknown ship with design elements remarkably similar to those of the scout ship they had recently destroyed. Kim's hands trembled with excitement as he continued reading. Unlike the recent encounter, the captain of that exploration vessel had exercised caution, maintaining distance while attempting communication. After several days of non-hostile observation, the unknown vessel had departed, leaving behind what appeared to be a simple mathematical sequence that the Imperial scientists interpreted as a peaceful greeting. The captain's final report contained an assessment that sent chills down Kim's spine. "The beings appear to possess technology far beyond our understanding, yet they made no aggressive moves despite having ample opportunity. Their vessel's design belies its capabilities, what appears primitive houses systems beyond our comprehension. I recommend future encounters be handled with utmost diplomatic care, as they seem peaceful but formidable." Kim gathered the relevant historical records and practically ran from the archives. The turbolift seemed agonizingly slow as it carried him up to the Defense Coordination Center, where Admiral Choi was overseeing deployment plans. Guards stopped him at the entrance, but upon seeing his newly issued high-clearance identification, reluctantly allowed him through. Kim spotted Admiral Choi standing before the main tactical display and approached with appropriate military courtesy, despite his civilian status. "Sir," he said, after being acknowledged, "I believe we've encountered this species before." Kim placed the data crystal containing his discovery into the nearest terminal. 300 years ago, a similar vessel was observed, but left undisturbed. The Admiral then wrote that they seemed peaceful but formidable. Admiral Choi's expression darkened as he reviewed the historical record, and this time, instead of peaceful observation, we destroyed their vessel without provocation. He closed, his eyes briefly, the full weight of their situation becoming clearer. "Find me everything you can about the region beyond the Crimson Nebula. If we're to have any chance of diplomatic resolution, we need to understand who we're facing." As Kim hurried to comply, emergency alarms began blaring throughout the complex. On the main tactical display, long-range sensor feeds showed energy distortions forming at the edge of Imperial space, the telltale signs of multiple vessels preparing to exit faster than light travel. The waiting was over. First contact, real first contact, was about to begin. The Imperial Deep Space Monitoring Station Epsilon 9 hung like a metallic spider in the emptiness of space, its long sensor arrays stretching outward like delicate legs tasting the void. For 3 long months, the station's crew had maintained heightened alert status, scanning the region where the scout ship had been destroyed. Personnel were exhausted from double shifts and constant drills, their nerves frayed from the endless waiting. Officer Yang sat at the primary sensor console, absently sipping a stimulant drink that had gone cold hours ago. His eyes had begun to glaze over from staring at the same readings day after day. Nothing changed in the emptiness beyond Imperial space, until suddenly everything did. The console erupted with warnings as energy readings spiked across multiple sectors. Zhang nearly knocked over his drink as he jolted to attention, his fingers flying across the controls to verify the readings. "Contact! Multiple contacts!" he shouted, his voice cracking with tension. "Massive subspace distortions at coordinates 227 by 118. The monitoring station's commander rushed to Zhang's station, his face pale in the blue glow of the sensor displays. "How many vessels?" Zhang swallowed hard as the computer continued its count. 50. 70. Still rising, sir." The final tally made his blood run cold. 117 vessels confirmed, similar design to the reconnaissance ship, but much larger. The station's communication officer was already transmitting emergency codes to Imperial Command as the commander ordered, "Full sensor sweep. I want detailed scans of their weapon systems, energy signatures, everything." The massive view screen at the front of the control room displayed the incoming fleet. Unlike the chaotic approach typical of multi-species armadas, these ships moved with unsettling precision, perfect formation, synchronized velocity, not a single vessel out of alignment. They resembled the scout ship in basic design philosophy, but were clearly built for different purposes. Some appeared to be dedicated warships with sleek, predatory lines, while others were massive, bulky vessels that the computer identified as probable carriers or dreadnoughts. "They're not attempting to conceal their approach," the tactical officer noted with surprise. "It's almost like they want us to see them coming." "Or they don't care if we do," the commander replied grimly, "because they don't fear our response." Across the Empire, the response to the approaching fleet was immediate and massive. The Imperial Defense Force had spent 3 months preparing for this moment, positioning fleets, constructing defensive platforms, and drilling for countless combat scenarios. Now those preparations would be tested. Admiral Choi stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned super dreadnought Imperial Wrath, the most powerful warship ever constructed by the Dosu Empire. Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, each aware that they might be the Empire's last line of defense if the outer fleets failed. "The unknown fleet has passed the Carillon boundary," his executive officer reported. Reach Admiral Tech's Fifth Fleet in approximately 20 minutes. Choi nodded, his face giving away nothing of the turmoil within. Order Admiral Tech to follow Engagement Protocol 3. Attempt communication first, but do not allow them to advance past the Gamma Line under any circumstances. The Fifth Fleet represented the Empire's first defensive layer, 300 warships, arranged in a complex three-dimensional formation designed to channel approaching vessels into predetermined kill zones. Admiral Tech was a solid commander with an excellent combat record, though he had never faced anything like this unknown fleet. As the minutes ticked by, Choi watched the tactical display showing the two fleets drawing closer. The unknown vessels maintained their perfect formation even as they approached the Imperial fleet. Admiral Tech reports communication attempts on all standard frequencies, the communications officer announced. No response from the unknown fleet. Choi's hand tightened on the railing. They're jamming us? Negative, sir. The signals are being received but ignored. The tension on the bridge ratcheted higher as the distance between the fleets closed to weapons range. Admiral Tech, following protocol, ordered his vessels to take up defensive positions rather than firing immediately. One last chance for peaceful resolution. The unknown fleet responded by accelerating suddenly, their vessels moving with impossible agility for their size. The neat formation split into smaller attack groups that flowed like water around the Imperial formations. "They're engaging," shouted the tactical officer as the first energy readings spiked. The main view screen switched to a direct feed from the Fifth Fleet's command ship, just in time to show brilliant blue energy beams lancing out from the lead vessels of the unknown fleet. The beams struck the Imperial cruiser, Resolute Defender, and instead of dissipating against its shields as expected, they passed through as if the defensive barriers weren't even there. The cruiser's hull glowed white-hot at the impact points, before secondary explosions tore through its engineering section. "Impossible," whispered someone on the bridge. "Those shields were rated to withstand anything in our arsenal." The Imperial fleet responded with everything they had: plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and graviton beams, all focusing on the nearest unknown vessels. The space between the fleets lit up with weapons fire, a deadly light show against the backdrop of stars. When the energy discharges and explosions cleared, the results were devastating, but not for the unknown fleet. Their ships appeared completely untouched, the Imperial weapons having either missed entirely due to the unknown vessel's incredible maneuverability or been absorbed by defensive systems beyond Imperial understanding. Fifth Fleet reports multiple direct hits on target vessels, the tactical officer reported with disbelief in his voice, but no observable damage to enemy hull or systems. In contrast, Imperial ships were being systematically crippled by surgical strikes to engines, weapons systems, and command centers. The unknown fleet wasn't even attempting to destroy the Imperial vessels. They were neutralizing them with terrifying precision. "Admiral Tech is requesting permission to withdraw and regroup," the communications officer reported, the stress evident in her voice. Before Choi could respond, another officer called out, "We've lost contact with the Fifth Fleet command ship." The tactical display told the horrifying story. In less than 15 minutes of engagement, the Empire had lost 28 ships, crippled or destroyed, while inflicting 0 damage on the enemy fleet. The remaining Imperial vessels were already breaking formation, attempting to retreat. From the one-sided massacre, all remaining vessels of the Fifth Fleet are to fall back to defensive line Delta, Choi ordered, his mind racing through rapidly dwindling options. Sixth and Seventh Fleets to assume covering positions. As the remnants of the Fifth Fleet retreated, something unexpected happened. The unknown fleet halted their advance, maintaining position just inside Imperial space, but making no move to pursue the retreating vessels. "Sir," the communications officer said, her eyes wide, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel of the unknown fleet. It's being broadcast on all Imperial channels simultaneously." "How is that possible?" Choi demanded. "Those are encrypted military frequencies." "I don't know, sir, but the message is coming through on every communication device across all Imperial systems." "On screen," Choi ordered. The view screen flickered and revealed the bridge of the unknown flagship. Standing in the center was a figure that looked surprisingly similar to many humanoid species in the galaxy. Bipedal, with 2 arms and a head of similar proportions to the Dosu themselves, though lacking the characteristic blue skin tone and elongated features of the imperial species. The being wore what appeared to be a simple uniform, without excessive ornamentation, though an observant eye might notice the material seemed to shift slightly, suggesting technology woven into the fabric itself. When the being spoke, its voice was calm, measured, and somehow being perfectly translated into the imperial language, despite their encryption. "I am Fleet Commander Jin of the United Earth Defense Force. 3 standard months ago, you destroyed our unarmed scientific vessel, conducting peaceful observations at the edge of your territory. That vessel carried 16 of our finest researchers on a mission of knowledge and peaceful contact." The commander paused, and Choi could see genuine grief in the alien's expression before it hardened into something more resolute. "We have disabled your defensive fleet with minimal force to demonstrate our capabilities without causing unnecessary loss of life. We could have destroyed them completely, but that is not our way unless provoked beyond measure." The commander leaned slightly forward. "You destroyed our unarmed scientific vessel. We come seeking answers. We await communication from your leadership." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Admiral Choi stared at the blank screen, the reality of their situation becoming crystal clear. The Empire, for all its might and glory, had just encountered a civilization technologically superior in every measurable way. And worse, they had given this civilization every reason to consider them hostile. "Send word to the Emperor," Choi said quietly. "Tell him exactly what we're facing." The Grand Council chamber of the Imperial Palace fell silent as the holographic transmission from Admiral Choi faded. Emperor Do remained motionless on his throne, his usually imperious face frozen in an expression of disbelief. Around him, ministers and military commanders exchanged fearful glances. The unthinkable now a reality. An enemy force had effortlessly defeated their first line of defense and was advancing deeper into Imperial territory. "Impossible, Minister," Jin finally whispered, breaking the silence. "No civilization could have developed such technology without our knowledge." The Emperor rose slowly from his throne, his ornate robes rustling in the quiet chamber. "And yet, they have." His voice was calm but cold. "The question now is not how this happened, but what we do next." As Imperial forces scrambled to establish new defensive lines, Analyst Kim worked frantically in a secured communication center, coordinating with researchers across the Empire to compile everything known about the mysterious humans. Holographics. Displays surrounded him, showing fragments of historical records, sensor readings from the brief battle, and analysis of the human communication patterns. "There's something here," Kim muttered, staring at a pattern emerging from the data. "These encounters aren't random." He pulled up a star chart showing all recorded sightings of vessels similar to the destroyed scout ship over the past 3 centuries. When plotted together, they formed a clear pattern, a systematic survey of Imperial territory, working methodically from the outer regions inward. The humans hadn't just appeared suddenly. They had been studying the Empire for generations. "Sir," Kim called to Admiral Choi, who had just arrived from an emergency strategy session. "You need to see this." As the human fleet advanced steadily through Imperial space, they encountered diminishing resistance. The massive military machine of the Dosu Empire, feared throughout the galaxy for its ruthless efficiency, found itself outmaneuvered at every turn. It wasn't just superior technology. The humans seemed to anticipate Imperial tactics before they were even implemented. Aboard the human flagship Terra Ascendant, Fleet Commander Jin studied tactical displays with his senior officers. Unlike the rigid hierarchy of the Imperial forces, the Human Command Center operated with fluid efficiency, officers freely offering observations and suggestions. "Their third fleet is attempting to establish a blockade at the Corellian asteroid belt," reported Tactical Officer Huan, her fingers dancing over holographic controls. "Standard Imperial containment formation, just as our historical analysis predicted." Jin nodded. "Proceed with counter-pattern Epsilon, minimal force, disabling shots only." The human fleet split into smaller attack groups, their ships moving, with impossible precision through the debris field of the asteroid belt. Imperial gunners fired desperately at the approaching vessels, but their targeting systems couldn't lock onto the strangely shifting energy signatures of the human ships. Blue-white energy beams lanced out from the human vessels, striking Imperial ships with surgical precision, disabling engines, weapon systems, and communications arrays without destroying the vessels themselves. Within 20 minutes, the entire Imperial blockade had been neutralized without a single casualty on either side. On the bridge of his crippled flagship, Imperial Admiral Tech watched in stunned amazement as human shuttles approached, carrying medical teams to treat injured Imperial crew members. "I don't understand," he said to the human medical officer who arrived on his bridge. "Why show mercy when you clearly have the power to destroy us?" The human looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Because unnecessary destruction has never been our way. We came for answers, not extermination." As the human fleet pushed inexorably toward Nexus Prime, the throne world of the Empire, panic spread through the Imperial population. Wealthy citizens fled to distant estates, while ordinary people huddled in their homes, terrified of the approaching alien armada that had so easily defeated their supposed protectors. Emperor Du stood in his private observatory atop the tallest spire of the Imperial Palace, watching as the last defensive fleet assembled in orbit above the planet. Beside him, Admiral Choi and Analyst Kim waited silently, both aware that the coming confrontation was likely to be the Empire's last stand. "Tell me about these humans," the Emperor finally said, still staring at the stars. "Tell me what you've learned." Kim stepped forward, clutching his data tablet. "Your Imperial Majesty, everything we've discovered points to one conclusion. The humans have been studying us for centuries. Their technology isn't just advanced. It's been specifically designed to counter our strengths and exploit our weaknesses. What appeared primitive in their scout vessel was intentional camouflage," Admiral Choi added. "They wanted us to underestimate them." "But why?" the Emperor demanded. "If they have such power, why hide it?" Before either man could respond, the observatory's communication system chimed urgently. "Your Majesty," came a panicked voice. "They're here. The human fleet has arrived in orbit." The three men turned to look through the transparent dome of the observatory. Above them, space itself seemed to ripple as over 100 human vessels materialized in perfect formation, having somehow bypassed the outer defense grid entirely. The ships were awesome in their scale and design, some sleek and predatory, others massive and imposing, all clearly built with technologies beyond Imperial understanding. The Imperial defensive fleet, caught by surprise, scrambled to form battle lines. For a moment, it seemed they might actually engage, until every Imperial vessel suddenly lost power, their engines and weapon systems shutting down simultaneously. They drifted helplessly in orbit, rendered completely harmless by some invisible technology. They've neutralized our entire fleet without firing a shot," Admiral Choi whispered, his face pale. The observatory's communication system activated again, but this time a different voice came through, calm, authoritative, and speaking. Perfect Imperial standard, without any translation delay. "Emperor Du of the Dosu Empire, I am Fleet Admiral Min of the United Earth Defense Force. I request your presence aboard my flagship for discussions regarding the future relationship between our civilizations. You may bring 2 advisors. We guarantee your safety, and will return you to your palace regardless of the outcome of our talks." The Emperor looked to Choi, who nodded grimly. "We have no choice, Your Majesty." 1 hour later, an Imperial shuttle docked with the human flagship. Emperor Do, flanked by Admiral Choi and Analyst Kim, walked through gleaming corridors that hummed with energy from technology they couldn't begin to comprehend. Robotic assistants and human crew members moved with purpose throughout the vessel, many nodding respectfully to the Imperial delegation, despite the circumstances. They were escorted to a large chamber with a circular table at its center. The walls appeared to be transparent, offering a breathtaking view of space around them, though Kim suspected it was an advanced holographic display rather than actual windows. Fleet Admiral Min rose as they entered, an older human with silver hair and eyes that reflected both wisdom and weariness. Unlike the elaborate ceremonial armor worn by Emperor Do, Min's uniform was simple and functional, with only small insignia indicating rank. "Thank you for accepting my invitation, Emperor," Min said with a respectful nod that fell just short of a bow. "Please be seated." Once they were all settled, Min activated a display in the center of the table, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Certain regions were highlighted in different colors. "What you are looking at is the known galaxy as we understand it," Min explained. "The blue regions represent the territory of the Dosu Empire. The green regions represent the United Earth, Alliance, and our allied civilizations." Emperor Do leaned forward, studying the map with shock. The green region was nearly 3 times the size of the Empire's territory, extending far beyond the Crimson Nebula into areas the Empire had never explored. "Impossible," the Emperor whispered. "We are the dominant power in this sector of the galaxy." "One of several dominant powers," Min corrected gently. "Beyond your borders exist dozens of civilizations, many older and more advanced than either of our species. Humanity has peacefully coexisted with these civilizations for centuries, establishing diplomatic and trade relationships rather than conquest." The Admiral's finger traced a path across the map. "For 300 years, we have observed the expansion of your empire. Your tendency toward military conquest concerned us, but we maintained a policy of non-interference as long as you remained within your established borders." Min's expression darkened slightly. "The vessel you destroyed was part of a diplomatic mission. After centuries of observation, our council decided it was time to make formal contact. We wanted to assess whether your empire could be reasoned with, whether peaceful coexistence was possible. Its destruction provided our answer." Emperor Du's face flushed a deeper blue in anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. "If you are so peaceful, then explain this show of military force." Admiral Min smiled sadly. "What you're seeing is not a military invasion, Emperor Do. This fleet represents less than 5% of our defense capacity, assembled quickly as a response force. Had we intended conquest, we would not be having this conversation. Your empire would already have fallen." Analyst Kim, who had remained silent until now, suddenly understood. "You never meant to conquer us. This was a demonstration." Min nodded. "Precisely. We needed to show you the reality of your situation before meaningful dialogue could begin." As the implications sank in, Emperor Do seemed to physically shrink in his ornate chair. His invincible empire, the supposed pinnacle of galactic civilization, had become just another chapter in humanity's long history of overcoming larger foes through superior technology and strategy. "What happens now?" the Emperor finally asked, his voice barely audible. Admiral Min's expression softened. "Now, we begin again. The United Earth Alliance proposes a peace treaty, followed by cultural and technological exchange, with certain limitations until trust is established. Your borders will remain intact, but expansion through military conquest ends today." He gestured to the larger galactic map. "There is a vast community of civilizations beyond your knowledge, Emperor. Some so ancient and advanced, they make both. Our species seem like children. We offer you a place in this larger community, should you choose to accept it." As the Imperial delegation returned to their shuttle hours later, terms of the initial agreement transmitted to the Imperial Records Office, Kim found himself standing next to Admiral Min on the observation deck, watching Imperial ships being systematically disarmed by small human vessels. "Your technology," Kim said hesitantly. "It's difficult to comprehend how you developed such capabilities without our knowledge," Min smiled. "What you're seeing is the result of cooperation rather than conquest. Each civilization we encountered brought new ideas, new perspectives. Together, we advanced further than any of us could have alone." As the Imperial shuttle prepared for departure, Min gazed out at the stars beyond. "Next time," he said quietly, almost to himself, "perhaps they'll think twice before shooting at our scouts." Kim nodded, understanding that the galaxy had suddenly become a much larger, more complex place than any Imperial citizen had ever imagined. The Age of Empire was ending, but perhaps something better might take its place. The end.